Well, we heard from our two guest speakers about how to define service, and as you've seen, it's always more than just the superficial side of service. And what we're going to do now is spend just a few minutes sharing with you the highlights of what we learned from our assessment that we did for Kuwait, and basically the lessons learned. So the first lesson that we learned were consumers are very, very eager to share their satisfaction or their opinion of service in Kuwait, And how do we know that? We had aimed for initially 6,000 votes. We felt that 6,000 votes was representative of the population, the different demographic groups and age groups that we have in Kuwait. When we ran the survey, and it was an online survey, of course, we obtained 10,000 votes. So that's a 40% increase on our estimation, and we also felt that 6,000 in itself in 1 month was very ambitious. So this is one of the lessons that we learned, so consumers are eager. We had, of the 10,000 votes, we kept around 1,300 votes out because they didn't meet the criteria we had set. I think we showed in the video we had 4 rules for people to fit into our assessment, so we have to remove the people that didn't meet these criteria. So that's lesson number 1. The second lesson is, what is the country level score? And the country level score overall for Kuwait is moderate. So it's neither excellent and it's neither very poor. And how do we know this? We came up with a legend because remember we're scoring from 1 to 10, and 10 is the highest score. So we said any company that scores 8 or above is very strong. Any company that scores 6 to 7 is moderate, and below that is either weak or needs development. So as I said, overall Kuwait was moderate, which means on the expectation index for Kuwait is 7.81. The actual satisfaction index is the blue chart that you see on the slide, and that's 7.68. So there's a little bit of a gap, which is normal. People would usually have a slightly higher expectation than what they actually get. So that's our second lesson. So our second lesson was that people think that service in Kuwait is moderate, not weak and not strong. Now let's take a look at our third lesson. Our third lesson is beginning to look at the service dimensions in terms of what are consumers' expectations before they go to a company and deal with it. What are their expectations on it? So you'll see in the chart that on the 8 dimensions that we measured, the highest rated, in other words, where people had the highest expectation, are on website and reliability. So people expected reliability to be strong or stronger, and they expected the website to be stronger. Where is it low? Where are people's expectations low? People expect value for money. In other words, if they're paying for something and they're getting something back in return, their expectation on that is not as high. And also, the other factor that had a lower expectation level was on the call center. So people expected call centers to basically be moderate, I suppose, but a weak moderate. And then the other variables, you'll see staff has a slightly high expectation as well. Now this is what people were expecting. So this is before they dealt with the company. After they dealt with the company, which is looking at our fourth lesson, in terms of what actual satisfaction is like, we see that the highest factors are still website, but now reliability slipped, and instead we see location. So people are assessing location and they're assessing website as being very strong or stronger, and the lowest still is value for money and call centers. And we also have a lower score for speed. So this is beginning to tell us that, okay, there's some areas that we need to work on. So that takes us to looking at gaps between these measures, which is the difference between what people expected before they went and what they actually got. And you'll see in this chart the gray or the left-hand side here. These are factors that are negative. In other words, people had a much higher expectation before they went than what they actually got. They expected the call center to be better than what it actually was. They expected reliability to be better than what it was, and the same for value for money. But we do have 3 factors, which is very interesting, that actually got positive gaps, which means people were expecting the service to be slightly lower than what they actually got. So they were pleased with the website, they were pleased with location, and I'm really happy to see that staff actually was one of those factors that got a positive gap, which means companies seem to be doing it right in terms of recruiting staff on some level, and this is average for Kuwait. Of course, it will differ by industry, so you might have a difference in the restaurant industry or a difference in the banking industry or the airline industry, but overall, these are what we saw. So to summarize on the dimensions, the factors that are pulling Kuwait's scores up are a little bit more physical. It is a little bit easier to outsource or to develop a website. it is easy to open a store and make it look pretty, or a restaurant and design it so it's attractive. And so that's what companies are getting better at. But the really complicated side, and I think Dr. Begin spoke about that, and also Abu-Ghazaleh spoke about that, is that you really have to measure all 8 service dimensions. And if you keep your eye on the ball and ensure that people feel that they're getting value for what they're paying for, call center and speed, these are the things that are putting it down, then we'll have better scores in Kuwait. So that was one of the lessons that we saw. Now we haven't shared any demographic data with you, so let's do that now. And what we looked at, and you'll see in the chart here, which on the top part is the age groups. And you'll see that the scores are very high for people over 60. They just seem to get better service. It could be their expectations are different. It could be because they have a little bit of white hair, they get treated better. There's a combination of factors here. But we've noticed that people that are 50 plus are very satisfied compared to, and this is an interesting one, the 40 to 49 age group seems to be less satisfied. Our explanation is possibly they're professionals, they're very demanding, their time is tight, so they want the service quick, now, good, you know, value for my money, as opposed to the other groups. Looking by nationality, we see that the most satisfied customers in Kuwait are Arabs. The least satisfied are expats, I mean non-Arab speaking individuals. Again, it could be because how they define service is different in their respective markets. And then finally, looking at it by gender, women are more satisfied than men. I can't explain that by saying that expectations for women are easier, or it could be the woman-engaged staff, and that's one of the theories that we have, that when a woman walks into a store, she naturally has, sorry men, but she has better people skills, so she'll more naturally greet and smile at the staff in front of her, and therefore we might get better service in return, so that could be part of it. So now the other factor that we haven't shared with you tonight, the 7th lesson that we've seen, is looking at loyalty. And we asked one question: what's the likelihood of your company being recommended on a score of 1 to 10? And we've discovered that there's 3 different customer groups that exist. One customer group is what we call, they're negative customers, they're detractors. These are people that if you ask them what's the likelihood of you recommending a company, they'll give you a score between 1 and 6. So these are negative customers. These are the people that will sit in a duania or in a dinner and say, don't go to this restaurant, don't drive that car, don't, you know, whatever, you name it, they'll say it. The second group of customers that we've discovered, and this is an international measure, it's not something we've created, so we're just using one of the tools available, is looking at passive customers. And passive customers are those that scored a 7 or an 8, which means, do you think they're satisfied? 7 or 8? On the face of it, they seem like they are satisfied. But 7 or 8 isn't very passionate. They're not going to sit there and say, you must fly on this airline, you must use this mobile operator. They're just not going to do it. The ones that are going to do it are the ones that scored a 9 or a 10. And they're the ones that will say, yes, you have to go, you know, this restaurant is fantastic, I love this car dealer, and when they fixed my car, they did X, Y, Z. So that's looking at these customers. So sorry, it was a long explanation to this figure, but what we're looking at here is the percent of your customers that are your ambassadors. So 31% means overall that 31% of Kuwait's population are promoters or ambassadors of the brand. And I ask you, do you think that's good or bad? It doesn't seem to be too bad, but at the same time, it's not a very good score to have. So if you look at the 60-year-old age group, wow, I want to have those as my ambassadors. And just recruit them and say, come talk about my, you know, talk about my bank, talk about my hospital. If I could just recruit them and have them do that, because they'll basically do a lot of positive word of mouth for you, which is great. The ones that are most negative in the age groups, again, is that 40 to 49 age group, as well as the 30 to 39. So these are the groups that are busy with their time, etc., but they're not going to be promoting you. Instead, possibly, they're going to be detractors, they're going to be criticizing you in public, so just keeping an eye on them. On nationalities, the population group that has the lowest number of promoters is Kuwaitis. And in terms of gender, males are the group that have the lowest level of promoters as well. So now we've looked at the dimensions, we've looked at the demographic groups. The thing that we haven't shared with you, the last piece of information I'm going to share with you tonight, is looking at the different categories that exist. In Kuwait, we measured 15 categories. And this is the rundown of the average of the categories. You'll see at the very top is the Kuwait level, 7.68. And you'll see there's quite a few categories that are actually above that level. And they tend to be, the top three tend to be in the restaurant industry. You'll see in the middle, towards the middle, you'll see some banks and airlines, car dealers. And at the very bottom are industries that seem to be more complicated, where they have to deal with problems, where they have to deal with issues such as mobile operators, car service, internet service providers, hospitals. So those are industries that maybe have a little bit more of a challenge. I'm not saying that running a restaurant is easy. I'm saying by comparison, running a restaurant to running a hospital, I don't know which one is harder. The last piece of information I'm going to share with you tonight is looking at outside of Kuwait, what service look like. So we compared ourselves to something called the American Customer Satisfaction Index. It's been around since 1976, the ACSI, and it's now run in a few other countries outside of the US. So we're just sharing with you the US versus the UK and then Kuwait. So if you look at the very bottom of our table here, you'll see that the Kuwait level for service is 7.7. Surprisingly, we're ahead of both the UK and the US markets. It doesn't look like too much, 0.1, but it is significant statistically. And in some industries, the ones shaded in red were actually way below or significantly below our peers in the UK and the US. And the ones in blue are where we're doing much better. As I said, more details are available. Just visit www.servicehero.com. So we've shared with you our 9 lessons from very detailed findings that we've been sifting through for the past few months. What we'd like to share with you now are recommendations. And really, I can't emphasize this enough, and I think our 2 previous speakers spoke about this as well with a very strong note in their voices. But the number 1 lesson is your customers know what they want. You need to get to know them. You need to ensure that you always understand what your customers want. You always understand what they think of you. Not an impression, yeah, they like us, but really constantly doing the research to ensure that you know that. But our other recommendations are, 1, is focus on all service dimensions. Focus on speed. Focus on reliability. Focus on the product quality or the service quality you're offering, not just the website, not just the location, etc. So that's number 1, or recommendation. Also, you need to introduce image and loyalty programs. So begin to identify which of your customers may not be loyal, which of your customers are criticizing you all the time. And I think Dr. Bethany also mentioned that interview customers that leave you. That's true. They're a great source of information. Why did they leave you? They left you because, the service was very slow, or they mixed up with my bill, etc. So making sure that we track all types of customer groups and identify them. 3rd or 4th lesson, is customer service satisfaction has to happen constantly. I've seen many companies over the years that do a survey every once in a few years and then forget about it and sleep about it. You can't. You really can't afford it. And in this global climate where the economy is really tough, you need to make sure that you do these surveys regularly. And finally, keep your eye on your competition outside of your market, because best practice is a real source of information for industries. You can learn a lot from what other banks are doing in the UK and the US, what other airlines are doing, what other restaurants, etc. So that goes for all the industries. So I'm sorry, I think we've taken up a lot of your patience, and we're just about to announce the category winners for Kuwait. But before we do that, I'd like to just summarize that Service Hero is very much people-powered. It's the only survey or the only award that you will get that's really driven by, consumers, your consumers, what your people think of you. It's empirical, so it's scientific. We're also members of ESOMAR, which is the European Association for Market Research, Opinion and Market Research Society, so we follow the standards that ESOMAR has. As I mentioned before, we have an advisory council in place, and our margin of error is 5 plus or minus 5%. And Service Hero reports, which are available, you have on your tables. You can order your reports if you're interested for your industry. These are very detailed reports where you see yourself, your bank, your restaurant compared to your competitors, your rank among them, so you can learn where you're strong and where you're weak. So from that, you have the action to be able to improve your position. And finally, we really are proud that Service Hero is being introduced in Kuwait, because we feel that it puts Kuwait as, Shafafiyya, we talk about Shafafiyya in Kuwait, and improving the economy. This is one way to do it, transparency. We have information that can help drive the economy.